Hey there, welcome to episode 141 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo, as usual. We're recording this at 10:58 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time here in Greater Vegas on Wednesday, July 22nd, 2026. Today's title and topic, Getting Online. Quaggling Sand is a program about me. It's one of the few things about which I can say such a thing. Memories, stories, tales, recollections. A monologue, an audio essay. Don't expect guests to join in. Do expect boring stories. Well, you might find them interesting. Some people do. I'm basically leaving receipts. You never know. Somewhere down the road, I may forget all of these things. And so I will have my own voice, broken though it may be lately, more so than normal, telling them. So maybe I'll believe them. Getting online. Yes. Seminal moments. Quaggling sand, by the way, is a technical term I coined when I was very young. You will probably know it better as pins and needles. In this context, though, it is the swirling of memories in the mind, inside the head, in the noggin. Quaggling sand, here you are. Episode 141 already on this July 22nd. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, including a very brief summary today. And in this case, the two usual links, the homepage and the Buy Me a Coffee profile page. I was pondering, should I include links to some of the devices or what? You know what? You know where to find them, ironically, online. So if you're interested, you can do some searching. You can use Google and continue to ruin the internet or use some other platform of choice. I don't even know. Do any of these platforms not use AI to build some sort of a response for you so you don't have to trouble yourself visiting the rest of the internet? Where are we going with all of that? Anyway, let's get started so we can get finished on this lovely, very warm, still quite, well close, but we're still in the morning of Wednesday. We do normally release new episodes of this program on Wednesday mornings or Wednesdays, as the case may be. The summary of today's episode then. Once upon a time, there was no internets for normal people to visit and abuse or be abused by. And then there was. Quaggling Sand homepage, QUOGGLINGSAND, Quaggling Sand, just like it sounds, .com. I have no further comments. One of these days, my web traffic is like almost zero, so eventually it will look nice. It needs to be integrated into some other things that I'm working on, which I keep talking about, and which are works in progress, and then this will kind of come around at some point. But yeah, to the two people I think that visited in the last week, hello. The profile page linking everything, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. It's a freeform profile page. I've had it for more than 5 years. You don't have to spend any money. You don't have to buy me a coffee. You can if you want. You will find links to all of my various media productions, a few projects, some biographical information, and some affiliate links for things that I actually use. If you'd like to support the efforts that way, you can buy me a coffee. Like I said, you don't have to. You don't have to spend any money at all. Really, I do this for the love of the game. Do be aware that the Buy Me an Update audio program used to be published here exclusively at buymeacoffee.com/danhugo/posts. And it is still published there, though not exclusively, but that's where the name comes from. It's published every Monday morning. It is a quick rundown on the previous week's audio program topics and then any news and announcements upcoming. How can you go wrong with 5 minutes or less for a Monday morning? That's all I got on the links. So let us begin. You've heard some of this before. If you've been listening to the Quaggling Sand audio program over the years, crazy. Born in New Jersey, that was me, moved to Glendale, Arizona just before I turned 6 years old. My dad was working for Honeywell, and they had a big family day event. And by the way, I think those are a missing piece of modernity, to be honest. If anyone's working at a big company, do they still invite families to come by and say, here's where we keep your family member chained up to their desk so they can work more hours than any human should for all of your benefits, I guess. But this was my first exposure in person to computers and technology of consequence. This wasn't a game console or something. These were scopes and meters and devices and electronica at Honeywell in, was it in Phoenix or Tempe? I can't remember. I didn't drive, so who knows. I think I was about 7, maybe 8, somewhere in there. Then probably 7 or 8, somewhere in there. Sure, sure. The Atari 2600 was in the picture eventually about 3 years later or so, I think. I think I was about 10. But for the most part, the cool stuff was in movies and television shows. Did anyone watch Whiz Kids way back then? I was totally into that show. Television was actually pretty influential. We can get into television someday, just in general. I was not quite the dream on. Like every aspect of life was centered on television, but I did consume a lot of television because that was sort of a portal into the world at the time for us latchkey Gen Xers. With shows like Arc 2, though, that was when I was very young. That show was was a lot for kids. It was like a dystopian future, post-apocalyptic on a Saturday morning. What? What were they thinking? But the part I was into was the nerded out RV, recreational vehicle. It was definitely the star of that show for me. But it was good preparation since we are getting to the dystopian future part. It's any day now. I saw the movie War Games. I think that was in 1983. I did look. I'm not looking right now, but I think last time I checked, I think it was 1983. I had a friend in high school who was arrested by federal marshals at the school for telecommunication fraud. And this was a very dumb hack to steal login credentials, sort of an embarrassingly stupid, actually. But it was like, oh, I don't want to do that. But this was the period in time when people were experimenting with doing good and bad online with their modems and dial-up phone numbers. I myself got a job at McDonald's, which I've talked about several times, at Metro Center Mall, and saved up my $3.25 per hour. I think about $3.15.25. I think I topped out at $3.85 an hour. Saved up to buy a 1200 baud Mitsuba modem, which the prices had come down because Hayes, the name of the game in the modem business back then, had launched their new 2400 baud modems. And so it began my life online, sort of. Now, we're Gen X, me and you listening to this probably. Lately, it is popular to reflect on Gen X compared to other generations, probably because we're moving into our third phase of life, if you're a fourth turning kind of person. So Gen Xers like myself, we're comparing ourselves to other generations. People are making YouTube videos and TikToks and books and remember when and how did we make it and so on. Seatbelts, remember those? We didn't have those, not as much. So being as weird as my generation was and is, it's kind of entertaining. As it happens, I've also been reading The Fourth Turning, which I just mentioned, which makes many connections between generation and cycles of time and history and whatnot. The why that leads one generation to alter the next as it continues to be influenced by the previous, as everything fits into an ever-moving timeline. The Fourth Turning books, both of them by Neil Howe, and I think his co-author was like William Strasberg, maybe. I'm not looking at it right now, but I think it's something like that. The Fourth Turning is probably the easier book to read. It kind of makes some simplifying assumptions about the first book, which is The Fourth Turning, and then a bunch of other words after it, like the generational time is whatever, But that one's goes into a lot more detail with a ton of examples, which become a little bit tedious. But The Fourth Turning is an easier read if you're curious. So these focus heavily on what we now refer to as the silent generation, the greatest generation. That we used to be the generation 13, I guess, but now we're Gen X. There was a different name for Gen Z. So the book, I think The Fourth Turning, the first book was written in 1993. So I think so. You can check if you want. So there's also a book that the two co-authors wrote about their theory, which I believe is just called Generations. I haven't read that yet. I don't know if I want to at this point, because it's just over and over again. Here's another example of the Fourth Turning and the Third Turning and the whatever. Sure, the internet did exist. Oh, by the way, we grew up without being online, which is we're the last generation to do that, pretty much. If you happen to be a Gen X person, and apparently, like I said, this was Gen 13 at some point, you and I are the last generation who grew up without being online, as I just said. So we are transitional of sorts. Sure, the internet existed for some time in the 80s, maybe even before. I cannot remember when it was a university computer. They were putting together the ARPANET, and it was the first time there was like a remote login so that people could communicate in some way. You can check online. The first network communication between sites using what would become today's internet. So it existed in the 80s for sure. Usenet News launched in 1983. So before that, the internet existed between universities and defense contractors and so on. And cell phones were just coming into the scene at ridiculous prices, especially per minute. Toward the end of the 80s, my mom had a cell phone bolted into the car because she was on her business demanded her that she be accessible out on the road, out in the field when she was doing her design work and so on. So she made heavy, I don't know, about 3,000 plus minutes per month or something insane. But for the most part, we were payphones and meetup times. And once we were out and about, it was luck that got us back together at that spot in the mall. There was no, oh, text me when you get here. You just had to have a feel for where we were headed and what time we were supposed to be there. That transitional period was weird between not and having such communication access. Maybe it was weird. I don't know. For me, it was kind of. It wasn't weird in the like, I can't believe this is happening kind of sense, but it was, it felt like a natural extension to community. Oh, I should, of course, be able to talk to people all the time. I should be reachable all the time. Little did we know, right? Did you ever think about that time when you did not have a cell phone, for example, and then you did? When you had to use a Yellow Pages to find a business or looked someone up in the White Pages? Oh, what's their phone number again? Remember the library, going and actually reading books or buying them at a bookstore perhaps and flipping through them with a light, not a backlight? I was in college when the internet was just entering the realm of, actual possibility for normal people, even though I had my modem before that. But with various tributaries, BitNet is my favorite one to refer to because I think people might have heard of that. But all uniting under one addressing and networking scheme that enabled interoperable email and locating IP addresses, Internet Protocol addresses, the standardization of TCP for IP, and then UDP, the whole, I think it's 7 layers of the network stack that enabled so much and continues to. We now call the internets. All of those things came together as the internets, which was all over the various colleges and universities already. One of the memories I have is sitting in the computer lab for J. Arthur, our computer science department system, for which I was a consultant, one of my work study jobs, and they had a big chart on the wall in the lab of various parts of what would become the internet. So I remember BitNet as being one of them. I think HMC was on BitNet. I think J. Arthur was. I don't know if HMC VAX was. Probably. Those were our two big systems. So first things first, I got that modem with some intention to try out the whole war dialing thing from war games. I also wanted to try out the online BBS world, bulletin board system, having been a part of the Arizona Apple Desert Menagerie, which would later become the Arizona Apple Users Group. I've talked about that before, and they had a BBS to share files and have discussions and so on. Depending on how much money people had to spend on their hosting of a BBS, you could have one person dial in. Maybe they had multiple modems. You could have 3 or 4 or 5 or more. Imagine that in your home at that time, back in the late mid 80s probably, 86, say 87. And I mentioned my friend who had been arrested at our high school, Sunnyswell High School, for telecommunications fraud. He had spread his home phone number around as a new access point for logging into online services. So not Telnet, which is still in use, although not much, but Telenet. Telenet was a bunch of phone numbers in different cities. You could probably call them a POP at this point, a point of presence. But it was sort of like a dial-in network, and then you could connect to other services and so on. So precursor to the internet. Telenet, if you can remember that far back, that way back when. So he spread his phone number around so people would call, and he would pretend to enable people to log into a service, then tell them access was down and try a different dial-up number. Like, oh, we're still under construction or something like this. And people did it. And then, of course, he used his home phone number. Enough said. I was a bit more creative in my pursuits. I had a war dialer, which I wrote. It was super simple basic program, total piece of cake, which is pretty simple. I mean, you literally would send a string to the modem, AT&T phone number, just have the phone number be a variable string or paste it into a string, or what is it, append the string. So append the suffix to a prefix string and send it over. And then so if you had your code would basically dial the modem and then wait for a connect. So it would wait for a response that it connected. So you would know you had reached a computer or something that answered, and it wasn't a human. So you can send your modem dial commands from a list of phone numbers. That part was easy. In this case, a prefix with a range of suffix values, like all of the numbers in the 937 prefix in Arizona, in Glendale, where we lived. So 602 937. I wrote 973. That would probably work also. 937, and then 000, and then on up to 9999 if you want. That would take a long time. And you would just record whenever a computer answered. So piece of cake. Very much like the movie War Games. I have told the digital pager story previously, where I could dial 1,000 digital pagers, and 1,000 was a practical number. It wasn't, you could dial them all. And I would dial 1,000 pagers, and I would pick different ranges. So it'd be like PageNet phone number, and then each digital pager had the 4-digit prefix. So it'd be 602, whatever the PageNet number was, prefix, and then I could start at 1000 to 1 to 2000, 1,000 pagers. Maths, plural. So I could dial 1,000 pagers, and that would take, I think it was like 6 hours or something crazy like that. Because dialing each and then entering the phone number of the destination. So I'd put one phone number on 1,000 pagers. So it was distributed denial of service attack on a phone number using humans to do the work. So it would take, I think I could do 3 per minute, something like that, because you had to do a dial, pause, put in the phone number, £, I think, at the end, hang up, start over. So I think it was 3 per minute. Whenever, and a digital pager, yeah. I also use a variant of the war dialer to find Sprint codes. So back then you could get a card. You'd have your Sprint phone number, and then they would give you a card, like an access card for convenience to stick in your wallet. But it basically had your, dial this 1-800 number and then enter your Sprint code. And then you can make free long distance calls or long distance calls on your Sprint account, make free payphone calls, I think, and so on. So I would just get these Sprint codes by dialing a computer through the Sprint number and generating random numbers until I found one that actually connected to the computer. So perfect. And this was around the time that I got lockpicks also. But these were, so the modem was exploration. I never hacked into anything, and I never, I certainly stole people's time with the pager program because I had them calling phone numbers for me. And then using Sprint codes possibly could have cost people money, although I think you could probably just call and say, hey, I didn't make this phone call. Because the Sprint codes would go away, which meant somebody had changed it because they probably noticed, bogus calls. But I never hacked into people's phone or systems. I never stole their account numbers and credentials by impersonating a dial-in phone number, things like this. But Simon & Simon, for example, Magnum PI and Simon & Simon had a lot of lock picking. They pretty much picked a lock in every episode of Simon & Simon, I think. And so I had to know. And it's almost as easy as they portrayed back then. So digital locks in modernity may be a good idea, but they have different problems. I avoided having a cell phone all through college, with only a few random people I knew back then actually having one. Mostly for emergencies, especially if they lived near somewhere in Southern California and they would drive home on the weekends or something, a phone for if they had car trouble on the road or whatever. So I knew a couple of people, but having grown up, later in high school, having grown up with that, at that point, watching people with their cell phones and, I have my phone number has a 1 in it, so other people pay to call me because they make the cell phone number a long distance or a toll call to defray the costs. I mean, the use of a cell phone, you had to justify it for business. Otherwise, it just didn't make sense. Or you had to be a celebrity. But it was going to be the future. There was no question about that. So we were online all the time, but networking in our dorm rooms, we didn't have to even go outside to be online all the time. And I knew people who did that, and you never saw them ever. We worked around our archaic phone switchboard, which would shut down at night. Like you couldn't call someone on our campus after 10 p.m. or whatever. Our archaic switchboard was replaced by chatting with AOL Instant Messenger, for example, if you needed to get a hold of somebody. AOL or AIM, AOL Instant Messenger was very popular back then. ICQ, there was another one, ICQ, IRC. Yeah, IRC is still around. ICQ, I don't know if that's still around. AIM, I think is still around, but I think it's like there's an open source platform that you can use. IRC is still around. That works fine. And then there are any number of messaging platforms nowadays as well that are competing for your keystrokes. So we had email, Usenet News, network chat. There was a bunch of possibilities there. It seemed good enough for a while. So I would get my first cell phone when I was working at Netscape, something around 1996. I think it was 97. We had a company discount, so I got a Nokia 2160 with the extended battery pack. It was huge, and it could only play the Nokia Snake game and dial phone numbers. I don't even know if I had texting, but the future was now in my pocket, no question. So, yeah, I did work at Netscape. I've mentioned this before. I don't know which was more influential in my case, getting that cell phone or working at Netscape with so much access to the early internet. Some guy named Dan Hugo reached out to me from South Africa when he was a kid. I want to say he was 13 at the time. I seem to remember that. So he sent me an email because we at Netscape had public profiles. Like you could have a page in the Netscape website. So he found me, hey, my name is Dan Hugo too. And so we had the same name, and that was interesting enough for him to reach out. So that was nice. And I think he went on to become more famous if this was the same kid. I don't know how many Dan Hugos were in South Africa, but he became more famous than I did for a while if it was him. But I was working in the internet space, of course, leading even cutting edge stuff. And we were trying out ideas that would eventually be mainstream sooner than was probably healthy. So many bugs launched so quickly. Hey, do I have any water? I don't really have any water. Let me see if I have water in here. Hang on a second. No, I think that's too hot. Too hot. Too hot. Okay, I have some water here. All right. Delightful. So I still had my US Robotics 33.6 modem. That's 33.6 kilobits per second. We were beyond the use of the term baud. That's a signaling thing, a quadrature, amplitude modulation, quadrature phase shift keying, constellations, and how many symbols per second, and so on. So all that stuff I learned in college. So 33.6 kilobits per second. Even 9600 baud modems or just 2400 baud modems with a different constellation. So 33.6 for so many years into my career. I got the 1200 baud modem when I was 16, and here I am 25, probably 26, and I've only increased my online speed by 1500 characters per second. Was that no, not 1500. Sorry, we went from 1200 to 33.6, so that's about 15 times. 1500, 15 times, something like that. So is that right? 1200, not 15. 1200. No, it's not 2400. I was thinking 1200. So 3 times, almost 3 times, not 15 times. Okay, simple math. I should be able to do that. 3 times would be 3600, and 10 times, 30 times? Almost 30 times. Okay, embarrassing. I didn't plan on doing math today. It's tricky because, those are not real numbers. Kilobits per second doesn't translate directly because you got compression now, modern day, whatever at the time. Anyway, so we had sped up, let's call it between 15 and 30 times, depending on what I was doing, depending on who you're dialed into, what their modem is, etc. So I can download my Debian installation files from my first home-built dual Pentium Pro computer on that, which took forever. But I also could just download them. I actually purchased CDs also at one point so I could install on my computer, so I could do the updates over my modem, but I installed the base system from CDs. It was good times back then. But I could also grab these from my computer at work at Netscape, where we had the fastest internet we could possibly have. So I would just bring my zip drive over, remember zip drives, and download updates instantly. My first home-built Pentium Pro computer was running Debian Linux, of course, so I could be all Linux all the time, Linux at work, Linux at home. And I would eventually try out a few different USR 56K modems. 56K was about the top of the consumer modem space. You could actually do 53 point something, 53.3 or 6 or something like this. But because of the way phones worked, so it's 56K theoretical maximum, but not really close. So I don't even know how many times faster than my 1200 baud modem that is. It's too big a number to calculate for me, clearly. But thanks to Fry's Electronics' liberal return policy, I basically tried out all the different brands of modems and returned all the ones that didn't work as well. Whatever happened to Fry's Electronics? Such a place of learning and exploration. Anyway, I was only all day, all the time. Wait, I was only all day, all the time at work. No, I was online. Who does this stuff? It's weird. I'm finding now that I type without thinking too much because I type without looking, right? Like a normal person. I'm not hunting and pecking. So I'm typing words and I sometimes get ahead of myself, or I sometimes, whatever. And it's spelled correctly only and online. Those are two valid words. I don't know why I said only, but I was online all day, all the time at work. Obviously, I was working at Netscape. That was the job, was being online. And I was in the security group, so we were working on encrypted email and so on. I would travel about 4 miles home, and I would get right back online with my modem using my one home phone number. And then I would be reachable on my cell phone. I had hit the ground running in the modern world of communications. I would depart Netscape to take a job with pre-IPO UMax Computer Corporation because I was chasing stock options. I think I've talked about that previously. I was working on the next generation computer platform that would enable Linux, Solaris, Windows NT, and Mac OS, and then who knows what else, to work on one single motherboard, one computer that could boot everything. We have that today. It's called, x86. x86-64 to some extent, ARM-64, maybe RISC-V someday. So, yeah. Eventually, the hardware would be abstracted away or made multi-platform just through the efforts of the programmers. So there was no need to have this computer platform at the time, and that's why you're not running a PowerPC platform machine, and probably never did. So it never really happened that way they planned, of course, but it was the point in time when I was working hands-on with hardware every single day. And UMax was probably one of my favorite jobs of all the jobs I've had, from an educational and co-worker and so on standpoint. And then getting one of the first 50 or so DSL, that's digital subscriber line connections, set up in our place in Sunnyvale with a Linux PowerPC network address translation firewall. So that was a Linux machine running a NAT network address translation kernel module with firewall and address translation rules and all that stuff. Several other computers in the house could share the DSL line, and I think I detailed this. I wrote some a pinging tool to capture error information because our modem kept resetting and they didn't believe me. So I had to generate logs with timestamps, and then eventually they said, oh yeah, you're right, it was a firmware bug. It's not us. Oh, it is us. Dorks. So the internet and I had become the best of friends. We were now online all the time. Social networking kills us. So it was sometime later, I had actually met one of the co-founders of RepRap. His name was Zach Smith. Yeah, he went by Hoken, I think it was. A very early 3D printer that could print all of its parts that you would need to reproduce itself. So it's very Fab Lab in concept. And he and his friend, I can't remember his friend's name, were trying to kick off their own family-oriented social network platform called MyKin. MySpace had been around for a little while, and some of the other Orchid and Friendster, I think, were in there. I think it was this person, Zach Smith, who invited me to join Facebook. So he was my very first Facebook friend. Isn't that exciting? I think it was the Facebook back then. It was when you had to have a college email address. And so I still had my college email address, the Hugo at hmc.edu. I could do that. So I did. Somewhere in there, the Alumni Association from Harvey Mudd College was discussing an alumni platform to reconnect the alumni and whatnot. And there was at the time a platform that was developed by an actual alum. So the person worked at some startup that was building tools for colleges to build an alumni platform. And rather than be supportive of that, I was in there too. I was like, no, the Facebook seems to work pretty well. Ugh, mistakes, errors, unforgivable almost. That was not a great decision at the end of the day. And I didn't argue against. I don't know if anybody made a decision based on my support of it, but I was supporting it, and that's too bad. I had a MySpace page, as I mentioned, and I witnessed, and I still have my MySpace page is still there, I think. I don't care, but I think it's still there. And I witnessed the growing contempt people had for attractive HTML design on that platform. And we were all going through an explosion of social networking tools like Orkut and Friendster, and then Facebook, and eventually Twitter, and so many more. Jaiku and Google Buzz. And I mean, there's so many, even more, tons more that did not quite make it. And, but I think the reason that they were able to kind of get out to try their best to put one toe in the water and see what happened, what would happen next. We all had this desire. I'm speaking for everyone. We all had a desire to get the same username or handle across all of these platforms, right? So maybe you didn't do that, but most people did. I mean, you could see them doing it. Like, oh, so anyone who had a nose for business branding knew that this would be the best practices anyway, to have one single name across any platform. So explaining your differing handles across platforms became a full-time job for a while. Better to pick one if possible. And again, for business, definitely. But this would make it easy to say, oh, I'm Dan Hugo or D Hugo. My username for computers is usually D Hugo, not always. But that was a college throwback. But Dan Hugo on social media is my usual. I needed to get the same name. And that need to get the same name led to many bursts of signups whenever a new platform kicked off. So like, oh, I got to get you never know if Jaiku is going to take off. So I'm going to be Dan Hugo on Jaiku and Dan Hugo on Twitter, right? I think I'm Dan Hugo on Twitter. I don't even care anymore about that. But so I try to get the same name, as always, many people did. So got to get the name. I always went with Dan Hugo if possible. And there may have been a D Hugo phase in there. Let me see. I'm just curious. Twitter, X. Do I still have a name? Oh, D Hugo is David Hugo. That's not me. So yeah, I think I was Dan Hugo. Yep. Dan Hugo is me. And it says I haven't posted. I wonder if it deleted everything. Who knows? Who cares? I joined Twitter in February of 2007. Yikes. For a time, Twitter was totally the thing for food trucks. So it was useful for a little while for that. But generally speaking, I had to get Dan Hugo everywhere. And there were two things for that. Some people go with like a totally random name. Sometimes it's like a character, or maybe they're into gaming or whatever, right? I went with Dan Hugo so people would know who I was and you could remember it and so on. And also I found that D Hugo, as we said, David Hugo has the Twitter handle D Hugo. We had that name collision with the kid in South Africa. So Dan Hugo was a little bit more useful, although because Dan Hugo in South Africa was also Dan Hugo here, we still had a collision, but I believe he went with DG Hugo, his middle initial probably, DG. So yeah, but you always had to sign up for everything. So who knows how many accounts I have on platforms that are still around. Probably not, but who knows. Yeah, I mentioned Dan Hugo in South Africa. We were very confused. Oh yeah, we were often confused by his fans because he was an Xterra triathlete and I am not. So I would get tagged in with hey, congratulations, so-and-so for winning the blah, 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 whatever. It's an easy mistake to make, of course, but generally speaking, we were seeing the handoff of our personal identity to those third-party platforms for what amounts to no good reason. Like, there's no reason to confuse me and Dan Hugo in South Africa other than the fact that we have the same handle on Twitter, right? Why is Twitter the one who causes, basically that causes the confusion? Because he has to be some other name on a platform for no reason. There's no reason for that. So it's too bad. It's unfortunate. Think about where we are today, though. How much have you handed over to other platforms? I mean, it's almost embarrassing and it's a little bit sad and probably a little problematic too. So I think after all these years, so what is it? I got my first I was online in 1980. Oh, I had my modem in 1980, say 85, 86, somewhere in there. BBSs and so on, dialing up modems and pagers and all that. On the internet in college for sure. Got the cell phone in what, 96, I think, 97, somewhere in there. Built my first computer, always online more and more and more. I had every Android phone for a while. So every time a new device came out, I had to have. So I had the Android 1, I had the Android 2 or whatever it was. Probably the best Android device they made because it was unique. It was inspired by the was it T-Mobile Sidekick? The Android 1 was also definitely Sidekick inspired, but Android 2 had a nice hinge mechanism. The screen would flip up, had a keyboard, had a little touch trackpad thing, kind of like a BlackBerry. Very sleek design, a little bit heavy, but pretty cool looking. There was the age of cool looking and unusual phones. So I was totally into having the cell phone and being online, and I was using the WAP browser, which was ridiculous, and the early days of texting. I remember when we worked at Philips, we were talking, so Philips Electronics created the displays for the Nokia phones and for Ericsson phones. A million displays per week, which seemed like a lot back then. Now it's nothing. But it was like, they go, oh yeah, people sit at a table in a coffee shop, and they'll text each other instead of speaking. And we thought that was ridiculous, but here we are. So yeah, the cell phone became an attachment in my pocket at all times. Oh, I remember when a friend of mine got a Palm 7, so he could use his PDA, his public personal digital assistant, while we were actually sitting at a place called Stoddard's in downtown Sunnyvale. He's like, oh, look, I just got this. Those were crazy times. So yeah, I've experienced the illusion of connection as we've devolved as humanity. Over the decades, I myself have witnessed handwritten letter exchanges. I used to write actual letters to my pen pals in different places with people in other countries even. The joys of international phone calls and the delays and echoes and costs of calling people in other countries, not to mention picking up a phone and arranging a friend gathering, maybe catching a movie and some pizza after. We used to do all those things. All these have faded into text messages or messaging through some third party that ultimately mines these messages, whether they are admit to it or not, for their own profit-driven purposes. And we rely on social media sites to communicate and share information, or we overshare information usually. And it may have gotten worse with the next generation or two. Millennials for sure. I typed millennial. I don't even know it. That's not even a word. With two N's. And Generation Z, although from what I understand, Generation Z is backing off of this a little bit. But all the Gen Z people I've interacted with and all the millennials I've interacted with are all still text. They don't want to talk on the phone. They don't want to pick up the phone. They don't want to make a phone call. They will share things on a social media site before they will email, etc. Hang on a second. Okay, that was a pause. That's not an edit. That's a pause. I unpaused. So is Gen Z coming back around to the older ways? I'm not really sure. Flip phones and in-person meetups are allegedly making a comeback. I can't say to that. I can't speak to that. I can't say directly if that's true. Is that a start? I don't know. Maybe. I just went looking online for someone I hadn't spoken to in a few years at this point here in the Vegas area. That person is still posting their life on Facebook. Yipes. I find that insane. I have to be honest, I don't want to know. I don't want to try to look that person up and communicate with them. It's not like, really? Yeah, you're still posting pictures of going to Disneyland on Facebook. Okay, crazy. I mean, this is an adult of, probably 30s. I don't want to know. I think I can go a few more years without talking to that person. Maybe they don't know how to talk to people anymore. I don't know. There are photos of the person speaking with other people, so I assume, but why? I don't know. Posting to Facebook and Instagram instead of, as Louis C.K. would say in a bit, live your life. Stop taking pictures. Live your life. Tell stories. Tell the person that you're having a coffee with sometime in person about the time you went to Disneyland. That's very different than just posting photos and then people commenting, oh, that looks great. Hey, that looks fun. I'm home looking at other people living their lives because they post pictures, oversharing. Okay, today, well, final point, final everything. This is the last bullet. Today, I am as online as ever. True story. Mostly consuming news, so I kind of keep track of what's going on in the world, and educational material about modern technologies, science, and other topics which I find interesting. And I'm trying to develop various things to fill some gaps in information sharing, which are not personal photos at Disneyland, but more, how much water do we have in our desert oasis and so on. I prefer email over social networking sites. I would rather email a person and they respond. That's very rare nowadays. And I am 23 years since signing up, looking forward to ditching LinkedIn. The professional network graph is still useful. It's nice to know who I used to know from some company and where they work now and so on, or to look up someone who has a particular role in a city government or some local agency or something. So that's convenient, but ultimately those people don't communicate anyway, so who cares? But the site itself is a steaming pile, recently ranked #1 as far as AI-generated slop content. It fancies itself a social media website now, competing with Instagram. Some of the stuff that people post on there is ridiculous. Like, it's not even, I don't like, and there's no engagement. You have to get ranked. The algorithm sucks. There's just nothing really good about LinkedIn anymore. The graph is useful, but we already had ways to do that before LinkedIn. I wish we would go back to that. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, all worthless to me. I really don't use them anymore. Even Mastodon has become less appealing. I rarely post. I have 4 different Mastodon accounts for different interest areas that don't really, whatever. They're kind of interesting sometimes. The protocol that underlies Mastodon ActivityPub, it does form the basis of the plan for our information sharing platform here in Vegas for the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. So I can't say that I'm not interested in the notion, but the posting on a social site and commenting and then having people get bent out of shape or saying dumb things, mansplaining. This is what happens when you connect people who should not connect. Do you have a right to talk to anyone on the planet? Maybe. Should we? No. So I think social networking, social media, I'm not the only one who says this. I think it's been something of an undoing. I think being terminally online has led to some weird perceptions and bad behaviors and so on. I think it's still an outlet for creativity and a platform, a communication platform on which new ideas can be tried and so on. The fact that the entire internet has been stolen many times over to create these AI models, you were a part of it whether you liked it or not, kind of thing. Not appealing, but here we are. And so yeah, we'll see what the future holds. I think this is a time of transition, and it will be interesting to see to what. People say now the internet is dead. That is a possibility. A lot more of it will be AI generated, which will make it much less useful. I have to wonder, though, if that will be an opportunity for people, humans, to say, hey, wait, now is a chance where I can stand out for being human. This is human created stuff, creativity, knowledge, stories, tales. I took this photo myself. It's real. This is actual light entering a lens, hitting a sensor, storing it right. It's not computer generated. There's no astronaut on a horse. So yeah, I think maybe the pendulum will swing back the other way. I'm hoping anyway. But yeah, I still like the internet, but I don't do the social. I would, email. So I emailed another friend of mine yesterday. Yeah, Tuesday. Heard back from the person on this morning. Turns out they were on the East Coast heading back west. So they sent me a response early in the morning and they were heading for the airport. So, oh, neat. I didn't need to check Facebook or LinkedIn to get that little update. This was a personal message back and forth about a couple of things. Oh yeah, how's it going? Say hey to so-and-so. Like normal people. I don't need the broadcast. And how many followers do you have? They're all robots. Come on. Nobody actually reads what you have to say every single day. And if they do, that's a problem. So yeah, I think after decades of being online, I think not being online is not a bad thing. What you do with your time online for me, has changed drastically. I really don't care if you see my picture of my food anymore. Foodie pics. Foodie pics are interesting if you're promoting your favorite food trucks, which I used to do. but I got to take a picture of this ice cream. Not really. Enjoy the ice cream. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, being online, going online, being online, and remaining online. We'll see what the future holds. I hope things change. Be a part of the change you want to see. I read that somewhere on the internet, misattributed to Abraham Lincoln, I think, or Einstein, one of those. Anyway, that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As always, don't forget to check out my Buy Me an Update audio program for 5-minute updates every Monday morning. And one of these weeks, I'll announce that the website I keep talking about for all of my various programs, websites, will have been reborn as something usable and appealing. So be sure and check every week for that big update. That's all I got for you today. Thank you. Bye-bye.